Hello, this is Mr. Cox with Supercharged Science. We're going to talk today briefly about poisonous snakes in Indiana. Now, these are just models. Again, I don't have the real ones in here. I wouldn't be handling the real poisonous snakes of Indiana. So, we do not have cobras, by the way. This is a cobra. You can tell by the white hood on the creature. We do have, not in Indiana, but in parts of Florida and more common in Texas, Arizona, New Mexico, of course, down into Mexico, the coral snake. There's the eastern coral snake in southern Florida, the western coral snake out west that has bands on it, and it is related to the cobra, but it doesn't have the wide, flattened head. These snakes are poisonous. In Indiana, most of our snakes are easy to determine whether they're poisonous or not. Now, if you don't know exactly what you're doing, and of course, if you're a minor under 18, I have to use especially to be careful because we do have poisonous snakes in Indiana. They're not real super common, but if you touch something you shouldn't or handle or mess with something you shouldn't, you can die from a bite. So in general, however, what in our snakes in Indiana, you can tell, again, this does not apply to the coral snakes. The coral snakes are different, but we don't have them here. In Indiana, if it has this type of a head that's not arrow-shaped, it's not swollen out really big. You can see it's swollen out bigger than the body. Usually, it can vary, but not a lot. This is a non-poisonous snake if it's from Indiana. Also, the non-poisonous snakes tend to have a long tapered tail that comes to a point. With your poisonous snakes in Indiana, these fall into the rattlesnake family, rattlesnakes, copperheads. These have a wide head because they're a pit viper. Notice that head compared to the non-poisonous snake. The pit vipers have a little pit there in front of their eye where they can, kind of between the front of their, where their tongue comes out of their mouth and their eye, there's a pit there. They can sense heat and detect vibrations with it, and to hunt for rats and mice. That's usually what they're looking for, small mammals to eat. But when they have that wide head there in Indiana and in much of the United States, but particularly in Indiana, that is a sign, leave it alone. It also has a more blunt tail. Now, the rattlesnakes will have rattles attached to it. Now, I've heard of cases where little kids have picked up cans of things they thought were worms, picked them up, put a bunch of them in a can, took them home, and then started getting sick with bites all over them, and they found out that they had baby rattlesnakes, and the baby rattlesnake just has a little nub on the end of it before it develops into a rattle, and sometimes they can be as deadly or more deadly than the adult. So they don't always have a visible rattle that you easily see. We also have the copperhead now. The colors vary. This one's very green. Most of our rattlesnakes are going to have greens and browns and grays and mixed in, and they're going to blend in very well with the background and be very difficult to see, very easy to step on. If they have the chance, they will usually threaten with the rattle and hiss. If they do that, don't lunge, don't make quick movements in front of it, but slowly and carefully back away from it. Don't get it excited. However, sometimes people step on them, or someone's horse steps on them, and the horse can get bit, and it'll rear up and throw the rider, and that type of thing. So we do have them. Like I said, I'm from kind of north central Indiana, north central east Indiana. We do have timber rattlesnakes. They're just not very common. And we have a small pygmy rattlesnake. And then in parts of the state up north, have a Massasauga rattlesnake that's a smaller rattlesnake too. The farther south you go in Indiana, the closer you get to the Ohio River, and then of course on into Kentucky, you have a lot bigger rattlesnakes. So you get in some of the southern parks like Clifty Falls, the state parks, Brown County, etc. There are rattlesnakes. You have to be careful. So don't mess with the snakes you find down there. I had one of my friend. I was down there at Clifty Falls one time, and she comes over and she said, "Yeah, I was just like found this really cool snake hiding out behind a trash can out here behind the like little hotel deal that's in the park, and it bit me. And I'm like, she was like, she didn't think it was a big deal. I'm like, can you please, can you show me where it's at, because we do have rattlesnakes and we have copperheads here. And it turned out to be a black water snake, and it was fine. And we helped chase it back towards the Ohio River. But we needed to know that she was just take it lackadaisically. It could have been a poisonous snake, and she could have died. So don't handle these things, especially if you don't know what you're doing, for sure. And our copperheads will have the white head like this, but have more of a copper collar to them. A lot of times bands on the back, or sometimes even almost penny-shaped colors to them, patterns to them. And I know my grandmother about died. She could have died. I said it that way. It didn't bite her. She had an old school tractor and thought it was the chain off the tractor, and bent down to pick it up because the same color, and it moved just in time before she touched it, or she would have been bit by a copperhead. So we have those are our main types of rattlesnakes in India. The timber rattlesnake, which is the big boy, the big girl for that matter, the big snake, the Massasauga, and the pygmy rattlesnake, and we have copperheads. Now, we do not generally have the water moccasin, the cottonmouth water moccasin. Now, I know people around here where I'm from, they'll swear and argue you to the end that we have them in our rivers and they've killed them and they fought with them and everything else. Mostly what we have in our waterways up here, you could have rattlesnakes, but they're not water moccasins. They do live in the water, but they're banded water snakes and black water snakes from the Natrix family. And they will try to run from you if they can, but they're more aggressive. They're not poisonous, but you don't really want to get bit by them. You can get an infection. Of course, it can cause you to bleed a lot. Not good. But you're not going to die from poison. But people will just swear they're water moccasins. They are not. And some of them can kind of flare their head out just a little bit to try to scare you off. And so they call them water moccasins and say that they're spreading their heads out to threaten you, and that's not what they are. So we have just recently found in extreme southern Indiana, not far from Jasper, there's one location where they found water moccasins. And they're in their own little colony there. They've been there for thousands of years, but generally we don't see them, especially not up here where I'm from, up around the Wabash River and Mississinawa River and that type of thing. So there's your rundown on snakes, garter snakes, those type of things we have all around. Ribbon snakes, they'll bite if they have to defend themselves, but they're not poisonous. You're best leaving them alone. All these snakes are important for the environment. They control harmful insects that could eat up our crops and cause disease. They control rats, mice, etc. They're an important part of the food chain.